At Dave Cooper Live, we connect the industry leaders in the architectural, engineering, and construction space with the people, the products, and the processes to help them build it better. All right, welcome everyone to Dave Cooper Live, where we connect the industry leaders in the AEC space with the people, the products, and the processes, enabling us all to build it better. And today, this is one interview you can't afford to miss. The mergers and acquisition market for U.S. home builders and construction companies is booming like never before. And here to break this record-breaking trend and what it is all about and what it means for offsite construction is none other than Curry Cornelius, Managing Director of Whelan Advisory Capital Markets. Whether you're looking to buy, sell, or expand in the U.S. housing market, or trying to understand what's happening with Asian investors, you don't want to go anywhere. We're going to be right back with this deep dive right after we thank our supporting members. So hold on tight, hang on to your shoes. Curry will be with us in one moment. Stream Modular, the only logistics company you need to transport your mods, pods, and panels. Our friends at Stream Modular are investing $50 million over the next 25 years to build the technology, solutions, and trailers needed to handle and transport the projects of today and meet the demands of tomorrow. Reach out to their team at streammodular.com to discuss your next project. CombiLift is the largest global manufacturer of multi-directional forklifts and straddle carriers, a leader in long load handling solutions, offering a free warehouse and site optimization design service. CombiLift helps companies of all sizes and from every industry maximize the capacity, safety, and efficiency of their warehouse and storage facilities. A big thank you to Paul Short and the team at CombiLift for helping us all to build it better. Visit them at combilift.com. Ready to scale up your offsite construction business? Introducing 4A Constructs, your solution to finding skilled labor for offsite manufacturing. Say goodbye to the headache of recruiting a skilled workforce with hand-selected certified tradesmen that are expertly trained and managed for offsite manufacturing, set crews, and finish crews, ensuring maximum productivity and safety. Unlock the future of skilled workforce development for all of your offsite construction needs. Visit them at 4aconstructs.com. All right, again, thank you to all of our supporting members and our sponsors. We cannot bring you all these informative conversations without the support of all of you out there. All right, let's get into it. Let's bring Curry into the show. Curry, how are you, my friend?
Doing great, Dave. It's great to be with you.
You know what? It is great to have you on the show. It's great to see Whelan Advisory participating in the Dave Cooper Live Show. I love what you have been doing. I love what Margaret's been doing throughout all the years that I've known you, and I'm super excited to hear about what's happening in the M&A market for home builders because I hear it's booming. But before we get into that, Curry, we want to know everything about you from the moment you were born to this very moment in time. Do not leave out any of the good stuff from the hospital, or we may have your mother on the show, or we may have Margaret on the show, but somebody's going to come on, but you only have 2 minutes to do it.
That's right. Well, a storied history. I'm originally from Nashville, Tennessee, the youngest of 4 kids. I left home and I guess to the hospital. I obviously don't recall and didn't hear many of the stories. I think as the youngest of 4 kids, they started trying to shelter me from the beginning. But there was a very famous picture of my dad in combat boots and uniform. He was an Air National Guard pilot. He flew C-130s for a really long time. And there's a famous, to me, picture of him holding me as an infant child, fresh to the world in his uniform. But grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, the youngest of 4 kids, so a little bit rough and tumble being the youngest of 4, and left home at age 15, went to boarding school, my choice. I wasn't forced to go to boarding school or anything like that because I was getting into trouble. But always just curious about that next challenge, that next horizon. And I know it's a really big world, so I'm always looking to explore, see new things, figure out new puzzles. Went to boarding school, then wanted to take another leap and go to Colorado to attend Colorado College, where I earned an economics and business degree. Graduated in 2008, which was an interesting time to graduate with an economics degree, especially. I started my first job the day that Lehman Brothers fell, is September 15th, 2008. I started in commercial banking. Quickly got bored in commercial banking. It was a great place to get my feet wet and start my career, but got a little bit bored and was looking for the next challenge. And so that was investment banking. And I think folks that come to this industry and stay in this industry, they're the type of people that run at challenges. And I would count myself in that group. And so I've been doing this now for 15 years.
Excellent, excellent. Well, hey, listen, big thanks to your dad for and your mom. It takes 2 for their service. So we have a lot of appreciation for the veterans on the show. And I'm glad you went there in your own free will. That's a good story. That's better than being forced. All right. So Curry, we're gonna do a whirlwind session here. We're gonna do about 30 minutes. We got a slide deck presentation we're gonna do. And for those of the out there, if you're wondering how you work in this industry with folks like Whelan Advisory, Curry, we're gonna give you some tips and tricks at the end as well. But let's hop into it. You ready to jump?
Let's do it. If I can share,
right, let's put it on the stage.
Yeah, bring up these slides. So yeah, Dave, appreciate the platform and the opportunity, and excited to talk to you today because the M&A market, as you said, is on fire. And so let's get straight into it. Before we get into the content, I do want to discuss my firm and who we are to help give you context for the perspectives we have. And so I'm a managing director with Whelan, as you mentioned. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've been with Whelan Advisory for the past 3 years. And Margaret Whelan is our founder and CEO. She's someone who needs no introduction. You're very close with her, Jennifer, as well, and have known her for a long time. She's got a great reputation in the residential industry and has been working in home building in some form or another for the past 30 years. And so Margaret's vision for Whelan Advisory was to bring her Wall Street experience down to middle market, privately owned businesses, bring a higher level of service to those clients with the same expertise. And so she's formed this team, which we have 100 years of experience between us. And that's exactly what we do today. I like to tell folks that we're really more of a housing company that focuses on investment banking as opposed to an investment bank that focuses on the housing industry, because it's truly part of our DNA. I serve on a couple of industry boards. All of our my colleagues also work across the industry, and it allows us to really get deep in the industry, understand the drivers behind what's going on. And this is kind of our overall focus. It all starts with home building as the primary driver of the industry, but also on the right, construction services and technology. And you can see we have clients across each of these verticals. So let's get into the content here, because I want to use our power half hour wisely, because the market is so dynamic right now. It's really the most dynamic we've ever seen as far as M&A in the home building industry. And there's 4 primary drivers of this that I'd like to talk to you about today. Number 1, there's industry certainty. There's volatility in the residential industry and in home building every day. and that's just inherent in the industry. But the long-term tailwinds, we are undersupplied in terms of housing. We all know that. We have to build a lot of homes. And M&A is really more about the future than it is the past. And so having that long runway, those tailwinds in front of us is incredibly helpful to get deals done. Now, this dynamic is not lost on buyers that are interested in the industry. There's a lot of folks that want to get into the residential industry. It's really been a global bright spot in the global economy over the past few years, really since COVID, and that's caught the attention of a lot of folks. And so we have a record number of buyers chasing companies in the home building and construction industry. And also it's the most diverse group of buyers, the variety of types of buyers. That includes Asian investors. And Asian investors is really kind of a subset of the buyer group, but they're so impactful that they get their own box. And then there's new conditions for private builders. Really, this is new challenges for private builders, and we'll talk about those as well. So what does this all kind of boil down to in terms of the effect on the M&A market and on the industry overall? It's a seller's market. It's a really great time to be selling your business in construction or home building. And maybe even more importantly, for even those that aren't participating in the industry or in the M&A market itself, the M&A market is causing structural industry changes. These are not cyclical changes. They will not revert. These are permanent changes. And so I'm going to walk you through kind of each of these. First and foremost, long-term industry demand is clear. We need a lot of homes, Dave. You know this. I know this. 1.9 million annually through the next 10 years, according to the John Burns team. Very smart people. This is how it breaks down. But again, very helpful to get deals done, to have these long-term tailwinds behind the industry. Record number of buyers. So I want to really break this down and walk you through the different types of buyers that are chasing home building companies. And the one that most folks and most everybody thinks of are the incumbent strategics, the long-term, larger home builders in the industry. D.R. Horton and Lennar are the two biggest you think of, but the top 10, Taylor Morrison, Century Communities, et cetera, they're all getting deals done. And they have a lot of cash. They've had some really good years recently, but they're short on land and people. And so how do you fill that gap? Via acquisitions. And that's exactly what they're doing. Now, in addition to kind of the old, school mainstay, large home builders, there's a growing group of regional strategics that are really coming up, growing their footprint, growing their capital base. They also have had some really good years, and investors are very confident in their tailwinds as well. And an example of this would be Smith Douglas Homes. They just had their IPO, they're coming up strong, and they're trying to gain the same advantages that the incumbent strategics have after they have grown and become so big and have diversity of markets, efficiencies of scale, things of that nature. Asian investors. I want you and the audience to put on your Asian investor hat, if you will, and let's kind of look from their perspective. So these are really big housing companies, especially from Japan. That's where the majority of the investment is coming from. And they're really large. Many of them are as big or even bigger than D.R. Horton or Lennar in terms of revenue that they bring in annually. And they're global companies. And so when they look at their home market, the demographics in Japan, Dave, really, really tough. I mean, we're talking about tailwinds here. They're projected to lose a third of their population over the next 40 years. So it is happening now. It is falling off a cliff. They see that. These are housing companies. So if you're a housing company, what do? You invest and build in housing, and they can't do that in their home market. So when they look globally across the world, what they see in the United States is a market that still has demographic tailwinds, is currently undersupplied, and also is really big. And so that's a great place to invest capital. And as their operations start to tail off in their home market, they start throwing off a lot of cash because they're not investing in growth in the future. And so they're bringing that cash to the United States because they still want to stay in their industry and they have to go somewhere with the right tailwinds. Last but not least, private equity firms. There's some out there. Apollo is backing New Home Company, and there's some smaller ones as well that have been participating in the market. They've calmed down over the past couple of years in terms of their investment, just like home buyers whose cost of capital has come up. Private equity firms' cost of capital, especially debt capital, has come up as well. And so they've been a little more hesitant. They've always been hesitant around the home building industry because the volatility of the industry is challenging for them. But they are historically have invested in the industry and to a certain extent will continue to do so in the future. And so I want to give you examples of these different buyer types. And I realized in thinking about transactions we've closed recently, we have good examples of each type. And so we just sold last month. We advised Pyatt Builders on their sale to Taylor Morrison. And Pyatt Builders was founded by Todd Pyatt, a long-term industry veteran. Indianapolis is a wonderful market, but it's hyper concentrated and hyper competitive. And so for Taylor Morrison, who wants a footprint in a growing market like Indy that's still affordable, it's just too expensive to go in there and try to greenfield or found their own operation from scratch. And so they partnered with Todd, who is still at Pyatt Builders and has become the division president for Taylor Morrison. And Todd's partner, who was a little more disconnected from the business, he was the CFO, and he just was kind of ready to retire and spend more time with his family, which is great. You know, he was able to move out as part of the transaction, and now hopefully he's on the beach, you know, sipping a margarita, something like that. So Todd stayed, and one partner decided to move along. Growing regional strategics. Devon Street Homes was a good size, you know, a few hundred units a year in Houston. And Stephen Ray was the owner of that business. He had founded it in 2006. And this was Smith Douglas's first M&A transaction, their first acquisition. So it was a good leap for them in terms of their national footprint, their national growth. And we were honored to work with them on that deal. Stephen Ray also became the division president for Smith Douglas and stayed in his position. So that's a little bit of a misconception, Dave, in M&A that we run into quite a bit, where folks think, you know, you throw them the keys and maybe they fire all your employees, something like that. But really, it's much more of a partnership. And even with the strategics, it's still, you know, that way. All the employees stayed in both of these deals, except for the CFO of Pyatt, who decided to move on. Let's talk about Asian investors. Daiwa House is literally as big as Lennar and DR Horton in terms of 2023 revenue. So they are a really big company, and they've been investing in the United States for some time now. And a couple of years ago, we advised Castle Rock Communities on their sale to Daiwa House. And in this case, Castle Rock was empowered to buy the Jones Company of Tennessee on behalf of Daiwa House. And so this is an example of Daiwa House really empowering Castle Rock Communities to go deploy additional capital on its behalf. This was a great fit for the Jones Company because the CEO was a little bit removed from the business, and the other owners were very removed from the business. They were a little bit older and just disconnected. And so Castle Rock was a better strategic and cultural fit for them. And last but not least, private equity. I told you, this is the only one that's not in the past year, last 12 months anyway. But private equity, we did sell McStain Neighborhoods to a smaller private equity firm, kind of a family office out of Kansas City. They're real estate focused, but they've also been investing in home building. So just kind of a, an array of deals. Yeah.
Let me jump in if I could on that real quick. Out of all of those, like Daiwa Home, are they the mergers and acquisitions, are these all traditional custom home builders, or are they using panelization offsite, or is that even a concern for them? Because earlier on, we were talking about labor shortages and everything that everybody's fighting with out there. As you're talking about some of these, for those that don't know out there, if any of them have anything to do with offsite or better ways of building, please, throw it out there so people can hear it.
It's a great question. It's really more market dependent. It is a good thing, especially for the Asian investors. They have a high appreciation.
Yeah.
It's not so much how you get to the result, Dave, when it comes to home building transactions, and especially when it's incumbent strategics or growing regional strategics that are making the acquisition. The question is less, do you use offsite? Right. It's more, how efficient are you? What are your cycle times? What is your return on invested capital? How quickly are you getting things done? How can you improve that? And it was really interesting. I skipped this in my intro, but I actually had the chance to visit Japan for a week last year. That was part of a group hosted by ModX, their industrialized construction experts, and also HUD. And we went to the Daiwa House corporate headquarters. We met with 50 Japanese executives, only one of which spoke during the meeting, but the other 49 were there. And they were giving us kind of their rundown of their U.S. strategy. And it was really interesting because they acquired Stanley Martin in 2017. And they had said in this meeting, which was 2023, 6-7 years later, that they were starting to consider making offsite recommendations to Stanley Martin. And so it took them that long to kind of get comfortable with the U.S. operation. And the last thing they want to do is come in and tell successful home builders how to run their business.
Right.
And so they don't interfere. They don't do that, but they do appreciate offsite. Obviously, I'm going to talk about that here in the upcoming offsite section. But it's a great question, but it's a little more like, what's the punchline as opposed to how do you get there? And with Jones Company, Nashville is a panelized market. They use full component kits, even on their relatively complex elevations and floor plans.
Excellent.
So the buyers are cash rich. I told you that. It's really stunning to see. These are public U.S. builders. And so this shows you just how much money is out there chasing these acquisitions. And that's why it's pushing up the value as far as the seller's market, why the valuations are so fantastic right now. But it's really stunning to see. I'll try and use my mouse a little bit here to kind of point things out. I mean, look how much it has gone up since the COVID years. And these are just the U.S. public. So it's just an astounding amount of capital sitting on the sidelines chasing these acquisitions. Book value of equity gone from 40 to almost 100. It's a ton of money that's chasing these deals, Dave. Yeah, it's a lot of capital sitting back. So the big guys are getting bigger, and the small guys, the mid-sized and small builders, it's a new day for them too. And unfortunately, the news is not great. And especially when it comes to capital challenges, the cost of capital for a single market builder like Pyatt Builders, who is a great builder in Indianapolis, top 10 builder there, their cost of capital has gone up significantly just with interest rates because they're a single market builder and they're just in one place. They're not very diversified. It's not like Lennar, who, if they have a slowdown over here in California, they can shift resources to the southeast or wherever. So for private builders, an additional potential stressor that's occurring is the regional banks that they have relationships with are largely pulling back, not in response to weakness in home building, but in response to weakness in commercial loans, weaknesses in other areas of their portfolio. And I think this quote is really powerful from a regional home builder, and that's from just last month. Meanwhile, the publics are just getting stronger. They're getting bigger. They have cheap capital. They're able to use kind of financial engineering to run out their capital costs a little bit more smoothly. And so they have cheaper capital, and they're also, they have lower rates as far as their borrowing and their cost of equity because they're so much more diversified. They're viewed as less risky to investors. And so this is kind of the punchline, Dave. So this is M&A in home building throughout the past, since 1993, so the past 30 years. And over this period, we average about 6 deals per year. You can see in 2024, this is just year to date, we've already done 10. Wow. And so it's a incredible pace that we're building. It could be a record year this year, we'll see. And you have to understand that in M&A, a lot of strategic planning takes place in the beginning part of the year. And so a lot of M&A gets done in the back half of the year. And we have a bunch of announcements that we'll hopefully have coming out through the summer and fall. Asian buyers are a major part of this. As you can see, their pace has really picked up. It kind of goes all the way back to 2013 and even before 2013. But Sumitomo made this acquisition in 2013. They were one of the earlier pioneers. They made some big acquisitions like Guillen Homes in Texas. But look at how the pace has really picked up through the COVID years. This is as these Asian housing companies are experiencing difficulty in their home market. And so they just have to put that capital. And so it's really becoming a bit of a land grab type scenario in terms of how much they're chasing these home builder deals. We've closed 8 of these transactions over the past few years. And so we know the market very well, and we know how to run processes effectively to get deals done with these Asian buyers because it is very different.
Yeah, Curry, let me ask you this. With the Asian market losing 40%, just for the audience out there, they're losing 40% because they're out of land and people are leaving to go elsewhere to live. It's more affordable. Why are they losing 40% of their market?
Well, it's 40% of their population.
Yeah.
And so I think that gets into a very interesting demographic study as far as why folks are not
Hanging
getting
out.
married and yeah, having children, and why
Yeah.
it's so scary for kids these days to go up to a girl in a bar and say hello. I don't know,
Right,
Dave.
right.
That gets pretty deep, and I think ties into technology and also how
Sure.
societies over time, as they get more wealthy, the birth rate does come down because folks are chasing professional opportunities and things of that nature.
Excellent.
So it is an incredible population decline though in a short period. It's just astounding. So why are Asian investors being successful in the U.S. market? They do bring a different perspective versus the other acquirers. They have really cheap capital. I was speaking with an Asian housing company recently, not even one that's in the United States yet. We know some others that are trying to make their way here quickly. And he said they just borrowed $1 billion from Japanese banks, and their interest rate is 1.4%. And that here, if you're borrowing that money, you're paying high single digits at least. And you have to be a massive corporation, which they really aren't relative to the others. And so that capital is just having that as an advantage is incredible. This allows them to be very aggressive on valuations because their cost of capital is so low. They can be more aggressive in terms of the valuations they offer U.S. Companies. They also offer win-win structures. So when a lot of people think of mergers and acquisitions, again, they think you throw them the keys and see you later, I sold 100%. But a lot of times there's something called rollover equity, where the folks that owned 100% will retain 40% or 20%, 30%, something like that, and they'll share in that upside. So these owners get to keep doing what they love. They've taken a lot of chips off the table, and now they have this really cheap debt to go grow their business. And it feels really different because it's not personal capital and there's not personal guarantees, things of that nature. And so it's truly a win-win partnership. While both pieces of the pie are growing, everybody wins in the end. And as far as details, they tend to exit that equity position in kind of 3 to 5 years. It's really up to them, but they can go longer if they want to. The team and the legacy typically stay with Asian investors. They're very rarely eliminated. Japanese investors, long-term oriented. So we in the United States, we might run out projections for a company 5 years. That's pretty advanced in terms of financial controls. But the Japanese will run out projections for 40 years, 40. They'll run out business plans. They'll have 100-year business plans. And so like my little anecdote about Stanley Martin, that's an example of just how long-term oriented they're thinking. They're not thinking about the next year or two. They're thinking about the next 10, 20, 30, and they're doing that right now. And then business as usual. Most folks that sell to the Japanese are astounded by how little changes. Very, very little changes, and they keep doing what has made them successful to date.
So how do you plan out 40 years, Curry? I mean, you're looking at these deals coming in. I'm sure people are sitting there saying, man, I can't even get past next year. A 40-year outlook is, I mean, that's extensive.
Yeah, honestly, Dave, I think the utility of those projections is up for debate.
Yeah.
But and so how do you do it? I don't know. I think you use assumptions just like any projection, and you really try to chart out what's going to happen demographically. So getting deeper into that industry background, because it's obviously affecting them in their home market right now. But look, I think the overarching point is that they're not bothered by short-term volatility in the home building industry, which we have and will likely always have. And so that's kind of the M&A market. So what are the changes? Like, why does this matter? Why do any home builders care, especially if you're not participating in the M&A market? Well, here's the big one. Let's talk about market share and how I've mentioned the publics, the big guys are getting bigger and stronger. So how does that manifest itself in the industry? Let's go back in time to 1990. U.S. publics had less than 10% market share. Let's fast forward today. They have almost 50%. And 15% gain in just the last 2 years. So if you're wondering, how many big advantages could they have, this is how advantaged they've been. And this is how it's changing the industry. It's becoming more concentrated, and the smaller and mid-sized home builders are getting squeezed. Now, not every market's the same, and we need to understand that because this is an outlay of the closings in the top 50 U.S. markets, and the top 5 account for a third of our closings. Just about the top 5 markets. Houston and Dallas are absolutely massive. We're talking about 30, 40, 50,000 homes being built each year in just those 2 markets, respectively. And so, if you want to be a big builder, Smith Douglas being a great example, you really kind of have to be in Houston because you just can't get that volume anywhere else around the nation. And that's been the case for D.R. Horton and Lennar as well. D.R. Horton's going to build 10,000 homes in Houston alone this year. So just really, really big cities, and the big builders are very strong in those markets. And as you follow the tail out, it just gets a little more risky, and the growth dynamics become a little more in question. Now, this is that concentration. This shows you again the top 50 markets. And so the top 10 builders in each of those markets, they have more than 50% market share. And in fact, almost 60% in 49 of the 50. So more competition, more concentrated competition, the big guys getting bigger. And you're seeing that in each of these cities.
Curry, these builders, are they building to sell or building to rent? Or is
Both.
it still a mix?
Yeah, both. And the big folks have, a lot of them have dedicated build to rent divisions. The small guys too, though, are dipping their toe there. And a lot of the smaller mid-sized builders, they're agnostic in terms of, where they're selling their homes. And investors will often come to them because, especially recently, there's been no resale. There's no single family rental. It's all build to rent. And so both is what I would say. But the bigger guys are more focused in courting those BTR investors as opposed to the smaller mid-sized guys, which it's more incidental most of the time. But we have seen, some of our clients take on build to rent investors as kind of, option value, and they'll do fee building for those folks. And so BTR is still having an impact across the industry as well.
Great.
So Dave, I want to talk about offsite. You and I are huge fans of the industry, and we've got kind of a half-hour format here. So I want to start with a subtle theme, and I want to see if you pick up on it on this next slide.
Yeah. It is better, in a lot of ways. But go ahead. I'm going to let you walk your way through this one.
It is, and I just want to boil this down. And we can all make the comparisons. Do you want to build the car in the parking lot or in the factory, et cetera? So in theory, is offsite better? Absolutely. And I can walk you through all these benefits in terms of scheduling, in terms of cycle times, continuous process improvement, quality, building that same house twice, because we don't do that right now. So look, it's there and it works. And in theory, this all makes perfect sense. But we all know there have been challenges in the industry with operators not surviving. And there's reasons for that. And offsite is not a silver bullet. It doesn't work in every situation. And there are inherent challenges that must be strategically managed. And instead of kind of going through the benefits and just kind of singing the praises to your audience, who I think is probably well-versed, I want to kind of focus on what are the inherent challenges? Why have there been these failures in the industry? And how can we strategically manage them? And so let's talk about some of those challenges. And this is by no means is this to, ding the offsite industry or put a stigma on it. It's more to, think strategically how these problems can be managed and fixed, because there is a very big opportunity for offsite construction in the United States. And a lot of dollars are flowing there, but they need to be smart dollars, and the companies need to be strategically managed and aware of these issues that have gotten other operators. And so when you think about offsite construction, even though in theory it makes perfect sense, from a capital perspective, it's pretty darn challenging. And that starts with upfront capital expenditure. You got to build the factory if you're going to have one for offsite construction. There's other, formats like Nile Built who are doing factories in the field and things of that nature. But most offsite companies, you're going to have some upfront capital expenditure. Okay, so it's a lot of money. Overhead expense. Once you have the factory, you got to keep that thing full. You got to keep your utilization up, or that overhead will eat you alive. And this is challenging, especially in housing, because of scheduling unpredictability and general short-term volatility. It's just part of the industry, and it happens. And then let's say you have the factory, you're covering your overhead. Well, eventually your beautiful product, modular or otherwise, it has to go out of the factory. And so then you have to either convince and woo framers to use your product and train them on how to use that, which they might be resistant because they think, it's going to replace their jobs and things like that. But then a lot of folks end up, getting their own installation force. And so suddenly you've got a factory, you've got overhead, and then you've got a labor force as well to install that product. And so it's a big capital outlay initially. And then there's additional problems like limited delivery radius and regulations, and really the industry was cleaned out in 2008. I put this picture, this is from Sekisui Heim in Japan, a factory I was able to tour. And it was a really eye-opening trip because they have a very successful and storied offsite industry. It goes back all the way to the 70s when they actually took a lot of the principles of US housing policy and just continued to run with them over the years, and have ended with a very powerful offsite industry. And that industry has really raised the bar for their overall housing market in terms of cycle times, material efficiency, and overall quality as well. And so why were they successful? It's because these were really big companies that could invest in these things, CapEx, overhead, installation, really invest over the long term. And even if there was short-term volatility, they could continue to carry on through those dips. And that's how they now 15% of their homes in Japan are built using offsite construction. It's only 3% here in the United States. And so it's a really big opportunity. And it's interesting, just from my perspective, seeing new operators come up, because there's obviously Katerra who kind of tried to do everything themselves and weren't really empowering the existing supply chain. They were really removing it. But there's some operators like the recent Ivory Innovations winner, Villa Homes, who Sean Roberts is based here in Denver. They're actually using other people's factories to build their product. And so they get to focus on everything else in terms of customer service, in terms of installation, in terms of navigating local building codes and things of that nature. So they kind of skip that whole step. So I think operators are recognizing these challenges, and we're seeing some new models come up in the industry that are really, really interesting and forward thinking.
So what you're saying is, instead of the manufacturer just supplying and building their own product to their builder network, they're actually working with developers or several developers and taking their product lines and being the builder for them behind the scenes.
That's right. And Villa Homes is actually using Clayton and those other type of folks. They're using those big existing factories, and they're kind of filling their capacity. So they're their flex capacity. So it's a very symbiotic relationship.
Sure.
So that's one forward thinking model. There's others like Mighty Buildings. I already mentioned NioBuilt. There's Kubi out there, who's very progressive and forward thinking, kind of factory in the field models. So there's new thoughts around this. We call it offsite. I kind of like to think of it in terms of industrialized construction, where offsite is a tool in the toolbox. And there absolutely is a place, especially in big metropolitan areas that have trade bases that are challenged. That's where it really makes a ton of sense. And look, there's a lot of great offsite operators out there, but historically they've been funded from a capital perspective by either friends and family money or institutional capital that comes from outside the industry. And both of those investor groups are thinking in terms of a 3 to 5 to maybe 7-year investment time horizon, and none of them offer strategic value. So I think what's really interesting, and this picture plays into it, is could Asian investors be kind of a white knight for the offsite industry because they understand it?
Right.
They've learned some hard lessons in their home market. And again, they have a ton of cheap money to put to work. So I think it's an exciting time in offsite construction. We do everything we can to advocate and advance the industry. And we just want to be, instead of just kind of singing the praises, we just want to be forthright about the challenges that are inherent and how to navigate around them.
Let me ask you a question on that overseas, and, love the Modix guy, Ryan and Ivan and all them. Tell me a little bit, like when you go and visit, some of these companies, Sekisui, all of them, is there government mandates telling them, or, part of their code that they have to use offsite? Because it's a little bit different here in the States, right? We don't have some of those same mandates that are coming from, in our case, Washington, D.C., saying, hey, listen, you have to try different modern methods of construction or what have you.
Yeah, great question. It's not a mandate. It's carrot or stick, right? And they didn't use the stick in Japan. So they took principles from the 70s that we were putting into place in the United States. We just politically backed off them and kind of gave up and let home builders go back to do what they were doing. But Japan did two primary things. Number one is they hosted national competitions and really incentivized investment in the offsite space. And it was really to improve the quality of their homes. In addition, they smoothed out the regulations. And so when we were in Japan, we went deep into this process because it's really different. Like, you don't have site inspectors in the field. Suddenly it's manufacturing. So it's a completely different set of rules that you have to understand. And then you have to have the installation kind of jive with that. And so what they did is they spent an immense amount of time and effort to smooth out the industry regulations and zoning for offsite construction to make sure that the types were certified and were able to get into the field. And we just haven't really yet done that. I mean, our code is obviously very, very different across the nation.
100%. All right. I'll let you keep going.
Yeah, they kind of smooth the path overall. And if we need to talk about offsite and the demand therein, just look at what the home builders are doing. And this shows the inherent demand in the industry for offsite solutions and the fact that big builders are indeed embracing these solutions. Innovative Construction Group was a client of ours back in 2018, I believe. And that's been a raging success for Pulte. And Pulte has continued to invest and opened a new facility in South Carolina recently. So they're expanding that operation. Toll and NVR have their divisions. Even mid-size guys like Van Meter, they have kind of said there's a better way to do this. And so let's invest. And so that's a great example of a company that's doing it right. And then the Japanese as well, a really interesting case. As I mentioned, Sumitomo made some big acquisitions in the traditional home building market, including Gian Homes, and they've really added to that footprint to have a national presence in the Smile States. And now they formed a new holding company called the Builder Solutions Group. And the purpose of that holding company is to go buy offsite construction companies to support their home building footprint. And so they're being progressive in terms of the vertical integration because they know the benefits. All of these folks do. And so they're investing themselves in the industry. And it's only going to get more intense too, Dave, by the way, because the labor force is aging at the rate that it is. And so those problems will force change, and the offsite industry will be there to help. So if you're an offsite company and you're thinking about mergers and acquisitions or investors, what's the universe out there? This is kind of it in terms of breakdown. There's strategics out there, there's home builders, and strategics would be like USLBM and BFS. Those are the two big ones. Asian investors are now investing in offsite construction, and there's still a growing group of private equity and family offices that are interested in offsite because, again, they see the opportunity too, and it just makes too much sense to not invest there. So we've talked about the home building market. We've given a flash of the offsite market. And so what are the valuation drivers overall when it comes to an M&A transaction? And I've laid this out for how builders are valued. Now I'll boil it down for offsite companies, but builders are valued on both the income statement and the balance sheet. So enterprise value to EBITDA, discounted cash flow analysis, that's the income statement, and then price to book and net asset value, that's for the balance sheet. Offsite companies are much, much easier. They're usually just enterprise value to EBITDA. There is nuance there in terms of CapEx, in terms of utilization of the facility, things of that nature. But that's kind of the science, Dave. Over and above that, what are the true value drivers in a transaction? A lot of folks kind of erroneously think that M&A just comes down to the numbers. It doesn't. It comes down to the strength of the markets, who runs the business, its people behind business, what kind of land that home builders have, return on invested capital. We talked about that, how efficient the business is overall, and what you're going to do in the future. Also, are your products offerings and your price points, are those complementary to me, the potential acquirer? Or, is there a bunch of overlap and so it's not that helpful for my operation? And this will give you a flavor of valuation overall. This is for home builders. And again, we're going back to the US publics overall. And this is how they've trended on a book value multiple over the past 10 years. And you can see that the long-term average is about 1.3 times over the entire 10-year period that we're looking at. But right here in May 2024, 1.7 times. So very much a seller's market right now. Again, because of that confidence in the industry, the publics are trading at really attractive multiples, and that trickles down to smaller and mid-sized folks who enter the M&A market and seek a transaction. Important to understand, again, I've mentioned this a couple times, it's not always 100% buyout. It's easy to understand a 100% buyout. It's clean, it's easy, everybody understands it. But very importantly is this idea of rollover equity and using the buyer's capital to continue growing your retained stake. And not every buyer is okay with this. Some buyers do prefer the clean 100% buyout, but the Asian investors, private equity groups, folks like that, they view this as a win-win strategy. And sometimes, a lot of the times, if a seller has 100%, they sell 60%, they retain 40, or sell 70 and retain 30. That retained stake, because the company grows so much in the 3 to 5 years after the transaction, even though it's 30 or 40%, it's often bigger than the first transaction. So it can be really meaningful to overall transaction consideration. Last but not least, out there is earnouts and seller financing. These, again, are tools in the M&A toolbox that can be used, but they have to be used really carefully. 70% of post-close litigation is related to earnouts. So you want to have really clear terms, short time horizons to try to avoid conflict. So just run through kind of tips and tricks, strategies for success when it comes to M&A. If you're thinking of undertaking a transaction, this is exactly what we tell all of our prospective clients. We're very choosy in who we take on, but these are kind of our requirements as a firm for who our clients are. So it boils down to readiness and organization, timing, that's both the company timing and the market timing, making sure your valuation expectations are not on the moon, they're somewhere realistic. And then last but not least, hire advisors and stay focused. So when I think about readiness and organization, strong leadership of the team and who's staying, who's going, understanding that. And for home builders especially, who manages acquisition and development of land, and is that person invested and ready to stay. When it comes to financial controls, you need to be organized. Audited financial statements are worth their weight in gold. Someone who translates those, being a CFO, a strong CFO, and then a detailed projection model. You don't have to go out 40 years. Three years is great. 2, 3, 4 years is great. And then corporate strategy, understanding who you are as a builder, as an offsite company. Don't try to be everything to everyone. I think some offsite companies get obsessed with their product, which I understand completely, but they start building affordable product and then move-up product and then luxury product and then some multifamily too, and it just kind of gets out of control. Try to really prove, one product, know your corporate identity, know what you're doing, and don't try to be everything to everyone. Some acquirers will come in and say, no, we like luxury product. Others will come in and say, we like affordable. And don't try to please everyone. Just say, hey, we do what we do. We've been successful because of this identity, and we're sticking to it. Timing and valuation, I mentioned market timing. So sometimes markets dip. So if you're a builder in California right now, maybe not the best time to sell your business or bring on investors. Company timing, you want stable historical earnings, but really you want that growth ahead. Being plateaued is okay, but if you're declining in terms of your financial performance, that's going to be tough because, again, investors are investing in the future. That's what they're buying. And last but not least, just understanding some of the things we just talked about, especially that second bite of the apple in terms of a majority recapitalization as opposed to 100% buyout. And then getting with experts on other meaningful terms. How much in taxes am I going to pay? What kind of structural considerations can I do to minimize that tax bill? Also minimizing holdbacks and escrows for indemnities and other reasons. And then hire an expert team. And that includes accountants, that includes, of course, a great investment banker. And yes, that is the Whelan logo in there, and legal counsel, M&A experienced legal counsel. Very, very important to have. It's great to get a bunch of money, but it's very important to protect it using legal terms and solid negotiation from an M&A perspective. And we have a bunch of great lawyers that we can recommend to you. But it shouldn't be a general counsel, even though folks sometimes try to use a general counsel like a longtime lawyer that they've used. It has to be someone who's an expert in M&A, and that's what they do every day, because the terms change and the concepts are much, much different from everyday legal work. And this is how long it takes. We break it down into 3 steps. The M&A process is anything but simple, but we break it down into 3 steps. Investment positioning is behind closed doors. That's where we come in, ask a bunch of questions, position your company in the best possible light in a very crisp marketing presentation. We then go to market to trusted contacts in the industry that we know. We stay in touch with these buyers. We only work for sellers, but we stay in touch with these buyers to understand their investment criteria and what they're looking for. And so we market with them, and then we solicit offers. And then last but not least, we go into final due diligence. That's pricing and execution. That takes about 90 days on the long end. And it's a complex process. It's a burden on the team. There's confidentiality risks, and there's major negotiation that does occur up into the signing of the definitive agreements. And we help guide our clients all the way through that. And then we get to the fun part at the end here, close and fund. That's what everybody loves, and folks get paid. So Dave, that's what I had for you today. I know it's a bit of a buffet of information, but it's a really exciting time in the M&A market, and incredibly dynamic. It's a seller's market right now. We don't know how long the M&A window will be open, but it's open right now. And for good, healthy companies, you will get a great result. And there's a lot of different flavors of partnership out there. It's not like you quit working. It's truly strategic partnerships that are available.
Awesome. Thank you, Curry, for that. I do have a question. I'm just going to leave that contact up there for a little bit so people can get that QR code. You guys by far are one of the most successful companies in this space that I have come across, and I talk to everybody. So what about outside, forces at work here? For example, in the world we live in, decarbonization, climate change, et cetera. Do you see these concerns influencing either acquisitions or growth strategies for companies? And do they need to be paying attention to it, or is it not that hot yet?
They need to be paying attention to it. I mean, I think that from more of a personal perspective, to be frank, Dave. I don't think this is an issue that's going away. I think it's going to get worse in terms of green building and climate change, and resiliency is really showing up. I serve on the Consumer Trends Council for John Burns, and resiliency is a major trend, especially for younger home buyers that kind of want to own their homes for a long time. And so that's a big deal for consumers, and thus for home builders, and thus for M&A. I would say that, look, green building starts with efficiency. And right now, a third of the materials purchased for a home on average go into a dumpster out front. And so that's a heinous waste of material. And so when it comes to offsite, we're much more efficient, both from a capital perspective, but really from a material perspective. And that makes it much more, the more advanced we get in terms of offsite solutions and having true continuous process improvement, the more we can affect change within an organization. So look, from an M&A perspective today, is it like, okay, what's your ESG policy, and what kind of green impacts do you have? Do you market that to your customers? Honestly, no, it doesn't really come up. But what, again, does come up is return on invested capital, overall efficiency, what kind of margins a business throws off. And those, I think, it all starts with building efficiently first, and then going from there.
You brought up a good point, and I know Margaret probably doesn't think I listen to every word she says, but I do, right? She did say in the past that we don't have a labor shortage. We have a waste problem, too much waste in time, process. So with that, does a migration towards offsite construction help the smaller builders be more nimble and compete with the bigger players? We were talking about how factories are working with developers now. What about the small builder, the smaller developers? Can they leverage that same opportunity?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the cycle times, and again, the overall efficiency, and what I just said, as far as having more control over your schedule and more certainty as far as your production mechanisms, absolutely. It's a huge advantage. And so I think it all starts for me when we start talking about offsite construction, it starts with structural building components. And Jess Los and Sean at SBCA, they do an absolutely fantastic job. And the adoption for even roof trusses in Texas, which blows my mind, but the adoption for structural components nationwide is still very low. And so that's where it all starts with offsite. And that's where you start to get more sophistication in the supply chain, sharpening on the laying of a foundation, and structural components kind of leads one thing to another in terms of offsite overall and modular eventually.
Yeah, for sure. And the SBCA has been doing great things. I was just with Jess Los in Washington for the Innovative Housing Showcase, which was pretty cool to see. All right, so we're just about out of time. I'm going to go to 3 comments here and 1 question. It looks like we got Andrew Seeley, a superb topic that threads all of what the industry needs with finance. Andrew Seeley, you are out there building it better as well. Good to see you, my friend. We have the past chair of the National Association of Home Builders taking a look at us today. Dave, looking ahead, what is the biggest challenge for offsite that Curry sees on the horizon? And for those of you that don't know Greg out there, he is the past chair, and he still gets to update the president and secretary of housing on housing policies and things that are happening in Washington, D.C. Curry, what's your answer to that?
I think I'm a hammer, and so everything's a nail. And so I think of capital, what is the capital challenge here? And I think the more tombstones on the side of the road for offsite companies, as far as those that didn't quite make it, the more challenging it is for the next offsite company to raise capital. And I think just given the volatility and the continued high interest rates, we're going to see, and because of the inherent challenges, we're going to see more offsite companies that do fail. But I don't think that should be at all kind of a judgment on the industry. Companies fail all the time, whether in offsite or not, but it does make the capital raise process more challenging for the new folks. But again, I am very hopeful that maybe the Asian housing companies are the white knight for offsite overall, because they have such a long time horizon. They're true strategic partners. And I think, again, the offsite industry is kind of sharpening its business models respectively to address these challenges. But just kind of general fundraising, it's hard. Investors are going to look at those failures.
We got one more question, and then we're going to have to wrap it up, everybody. We're over on time, but we're going to get to this one. And I will say the Asian market, Curry, I'm on my 2nd trip coming up in a few weeks back to South Korea and Laos within the year. Not only just meeting with investors and advisors over there, but even the secretaries of housing and stuff are really interested in what's going on so they can bring this technology here in there. Last one, Henry Mickelberg. He says, with so much rhetoric about efficiency claims of U.S. home builders, particularly offsite, which tends to be predicated upon very dodgy methodology under even mild scrutiny, how do you find robust enough data that meets the due diligence needs of the potential investor?
I think I follow that. So there's so much scrutiny. How do you find enough data? I think he's talking about data from the companies. And thank you, Henry, for the question. To be honest, we work with mature businesses. And so our cutoff is typically $10 million of EBITDA. That's what our clients have, because those are the institutional investors that we stay in touch with. Now, we do speak to younger offsite companies like Villa Homes all the time. And we try to kind of connect them within our network to folks like Housing Innovation Alliance, Dennis Steigerwalt, because he has a great network of folks that are circling around the industry and maybe investing in more of an angel or seed round. It really comes down to the company themselves. I recently met or kind of hosted a meeting between an offsite company and a Japanese housing company. And the offsite company had just kind of turned into the black in terms of profitability recently, but their organization, they were incredibly organized themselves. They had an overall mission, but they had kind of steps 1 through 30 to get there over the next 5 years. They had tight financial controls, and they had a very scrappy business model where they weren't going out and buying every new piece of equipment. They were kind of using things that were off the shelf to advance their overall offsite and turnkey framing operation. And I think those types of companies, like, that's something you can buy into because they're so focused to getting to the black and continuing to build a sustainable business. Whereas there's other folks that we run into where they say we're losing $10 million a year and we need another investor round or else we're done. And that's not good. That can't be the model in terms of we're just going to make money in 5 years. You need to be making money in the next 2 years if you just started. So it really comes down to the individual company.
Curry, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you coming on. And all these tips and tricks, listen, it's a booming market for mergers and acquisitions. And you just gave everybody the secret sauce on how to be successful and to set your company up to work with somebody like yourself in Whelan Advisory. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Dave. An honor.
Yeah, so don't go anywhere. For the rest of you out there, it is Monday. That means we got 4 more days to build it better. So make sure you tune in Wednesday. I'll be coming to you live from Boise, Idaho. Who's in Boise? Well, you're going to have to tune in and find out. Curry, don't go anywhere. I'll come back to you right after the end of the show here. Thanks, everybody. What an amazing show. Thank you to all of our sponsors for helping us to continue to bring all of these innovative conversations to all of you out there. Please visit them, see what they have to offer you. And as always, subscribe to the YouTube channel and ring that bell. It would mean the world to us. I'm Dave Cooper. Thanks for watching.